Hello fellow leggers, you are joining us in central London on, oh my goodness, such a busy day.
It's unbelievable. Literally, we picked the day to see this show on Whitehall when millions of people are marching against Brexit because we are on the day of potentially a deal finally passing after 3.5 years. Maybe, who knows?
37 years. This is the first day in 37 years that Parliament is sitting on a Saturday because 48 hours ago Boris Johnson agreed a deal with the EU, but he's taken it to Parliament today, and it looks as if hundreds of thousands of people are descending along this walkway, because where the Trafalgar Studios is, just down there is the Houses of Parliament, and they're all coming on their People's March. But we're here to see theatre.
But we're here to see theatre. We're not even here for that, but we've been caught up in it, and we are here to say a perennial classic from 1967 with a stellar cast. A Day in the Death of Joe Egg.
So stick around to hear all of our thoughts on this piece.
Find out how many stars.
Whether it's break a leg
or leg it. Well, you'll be finding out how many stars, but presumably we won't be talking about the amount of stars on the EU flag following the 31st. Following the 31st of October,
there might be one
around. Give you a bit of
There's
context.
thousands of people all marching from Trafalgar Square, which is just up from there, all in front of Trafalgar Studios, as you've said, down to Parliament.
It's incredible. I mean,
so let's see how we do.
It's an amazing atmosphere. Who knows what might happen?
Right.
But anyway, A Day in the Death of Joe Egg, written in 1967 by Peter Nichols, who passed away just 6 weeks ago. During rehearsals for this, at the age of 92. Whose other work includes another classic, Privates on Parade.
I've heard of it.
Gets staged a huge amount. Now, it tells the story of parents Bri and Sheila, who are struggling to save their own marriage whilst trying to raise their only child, Josephine, who suffers with cerebral palsy, as they test out the theory that laughter is the best medicine. And it was actually inspired by the playwright Peter Nichols' raising of his own child.
Interesting.
Really interesting. Now, it was a hit on both sides of the Atlantic back then, transferred to Broadway in 1968, and was nominated for 4 Tony Awards in that year, but it's been revived several times since then, both in the States and right here in London. This latest revival is directed by Simon Evans, who directed the fantastic Killer Joe right here as well.
Which is really great, starring Orlando Bloom.
Yeah, Orlando Bloom was in that. We really loved that one, but you can see our full thoughts just there. Now, outstanding cast once again for this one, with Toby Stephens as Bri. We last saw Toby on stage in Oslo at the National Theatre.
We did.
Really early on in the Lega career, actually.
One of our earlier reviews.
One of our most early reviews. And also, he's currently starring as Patriarch John Robinson on the Netflix reboot of the series Lost in Space.
Yes, which is going to have its second season just this Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas Eve.
Us and the Little Leggers are big fans of that show,
We do watch that. Now, Claire Skinner is also here in the role of Sheila. Claire has many stage credits. We saw her in Prism at the Hampstead Theatre alongside Robert Lindsay, and that production is currently on a UK tour. So if you've seen that, let us know down below.
Or on that review, just check it out up there.
Yeah, Claire's not in that tour, but Robert is.
But Robert is.
Claire's here. Now, she is probably best known for her role as Sue on the sitcom Outnumbered that she played in for almost 10 years.
Great.
On that show. And also, such fun, ladies and gentlemen, because we have the fabulous 4-time Olivier nominated and 1-time winner Patricia Hodge in this cast in the role of Grace. Patricia's stage credits go on, but notably she was choreographed by Bob Fosse in the 1973 West End premiere of Stephen Schwartz's Pippin.
Wow.
What an accolade.
That is.
But more recently she's become known for playing Miranda's mother Penny on 3 seasons of the BBC sitcom Miranda. Such fun.
Okay,
Such fun.
so an interesting cast.
Yeah.
It sounds an interesting piece. I've never heard of this piece, funny enough.
No, I hadn't until this revival, but looking it up, there's other productions that had the wonderful Victoria Hamilton in, who we saw in Albion.
Wow.
And Eddie Izzard was also in this, in previous productions. This production is running at 2 hours and 30 minutes, including intervals, so stick around for a 30-second interval breakdown.
And as usual, to the end, hear all of our thoughts and find out how many stars.
See if we've survived this.
We've come to the interval, which means it's time for the break-a-leggers.
30-second interval breakdown.
go. What do you think so
Starting
far?
with me,
Start
I mean,
with
it's
you.
interesting, sort of breaking the fourth wall, and there's no real right way to deal with a difficult situation, but using humour and sort of escapism in this way, it reminds me a lot of Virginia Woolf, but a little bit lesser. What about you?
I think it's a really interesting insight into quite a difficult situation, which is a lived situation. So the fact that it's real and the author's actual experience adds to that insight. However, some of the performances are really over the top, and as such, I'm struggling to buy into it. Fellow Leggers, we've come to the end of A Day in the Death of Joe Egg. So, Legger Simon, what did you make of that?
I think I died a little bit inside, to be honest, because I wanted it to be really great. I mean, I've heard words bounded about this piece like masterpiece. I've heard it's stood the test of time. It's had so many revivals since the late 60s. Yet I'm struggling to understand really why. Maybe at the time it was almost revolutionary in its style, in the fact that it's a constant breaking of the fourth wall. But I was just drawn to this idea of the themes that are throughout Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, with having to revert into fantasy in order to keep a relationship alive. And I just found it the lesser of those pieces. For me, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which has themes of fantasticalism and having a child in order to keep a relationship together, and in fact having a child in this, which is actually tearing a relationship further apart. Those things are just way better examined in that piece in particular, and in other things I've seen.
Interesting that you keep making parallels to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because I don't actually get that.
Okay.
Thinking about it, it doesn't strike me as a parallel at all. I can see in the writing that there is elements of genius, I do think, and overall what it's trying to say and the messages and the way it says it is good in terms of plot points, but I don't think it's delivered in the right way as a complete piece. It just
in the writing or within the performances?
Almost within the writing. Okay. There are parts of the second act, I think the last quarter, which was quite exciting, it almost turned quite farcical at certain stages. It almost had elements of clowning. This main character was a bit of a clown, was trying to put on a happy show when underneath is really sad and not happy. Talks about euthanasia as well, which again I imagine at the time would have been very topical, which I think even now is still topical, because it is a big discussion that there is, depending on where you are in the world, there's different views on that and different laws on that. So that's still topical, and again, dealing with someone who has long-term disability, the pressures that puts on a relationship, like there's themes in there that I think are really interesting.
But they should resonate more,
but it
right?
didn't
It's almost like having
land.
fantastic ingredients for a soup, and then when you put them together and try it, the soup tastes awful, but you can't work out why.
And that's it.
Because the ingredients are good.
But there were people who really enjoyed this and who stood at the end. I've got to say that now.
And
not everybody did.
There were people that didn't come back after
and
the
there
interval.
were people that didn't come back, and there was times where I was a bit like,
yeah, I fell asleep twice, and I think that has to come into play here, just because I found it slow. Once we'd had that first breaking out of character and then going back in, I sort of wanted a bit of structure, wanted a bit of purpose to have those moments in and out of, from in front of the curtain and behind, and I just didn't see the point in them ultimately. They became boring as time went on. They weren't interesting after it had happened once or twice.
yeah, okay.
Let's move on to some of the performances now, and I've got to say, that's where things do take a bit of an upward sort of
upwards ascent,
climb and ascent for me.
Okay,
particularly in Toby Stephens as Bri, who, as we've mentioned, text-wise and the play could be quite jarring, but I can see that everything that's expected of that character within the writing is perfectly delivered by him.
It's tricky, because I do think he's performing the part well. I just don't think the part is written well, because it's a bit of a, like I say, this clowning part, so I struggle to buy into him. But it's a bit of a cross between a pantomime dame, I thought a bit of Some Mothers Do Have Him, and a bit of
Have him. That's something else.
Have him, and also almost like Bryan Cranston when he was in Malcolm in the Middle, like really playing it up. I found it really hard to buy into him then, because it was so sent up to really resonate and feel for him.
I I loved his performance because it
he did great.
It reminded me of those Dudley Moore and Peter Cook movies, the old 1960s movies. I saw so much Peter Cook in him, and it reminded me of how brilliant that very British humour and sort of those impersonations and they harping back to a different time and blaming your mother, and how much fun that was when we used to be able to get away with it. There's a certain amount of stuff that actually is a bit close to the bone here by today's standards. I think we can't actually be as outwardly and as obtuse about things as we were.
Yes, but I did enjoy as well that he's doing something I haven't seen him do before in Oslo and Lost in Space. He's a very different character.
He's a great actor.
Yeah, a lot of strings to his bows, and he's an enjoyable, safe hands to be in.
I loved his performance personally. Yeah. Claire Skinner in the role of Sheila, safe. I just found her Claire Skinner. She's great at that character, but that's all she is. I've never seen a Claire Skinner role which has been wildly different to the last Claire Skinner role. In the way that you're saying that Toby in this is different to Toby in Lost in Space, Claire is Claire.
Yep, but it suits the part.
I mean,
she's trying to keep everything together.
Claire.
She's the mother. She's, while he's off doing his crazy stuff, she's trying to keep grounded and keep everything steady and going.
Can't wait to see her as Lady Macbeth, is what I would say.
And the tragedy falls into her hands come the end.
Yeah.
So,
Patricia Hodge as Grace, woefully underused for me.
But when she does come on, boy, does the piece take a turn.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed from her entrance right through to the end.
Absolutely.
That's when the piece picked up for me.
Don't expect to go in with much of her. It's very much Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love. She gets a few minutes, but she makes the most of them. Yeah. I love. She's a national treasure. She was made an OBE like 2 years ago.
Okay.
She's insane. She's incredible. She's Patricia Hodge.
She deserves it. She's
we'll
great.
Quickly bounce through the supporting actors. Lucy Eaton in the role of Pam. I quite like that character actually. In terms of, it was a little bit shallow. A little bit one level.
But I think that's the part.
Yeah, but that's the part.
Yeah.
I liked that. Clarence Smith as Freddie.
Over the top for me.
Okay, too much.
Too much. I wanted to be grounded, and I didn't feel as much grounded.
But Storm Toulis in the role of Jo, that could be a really difficult part to play. I mean, it's great that she's a less abled actress playing a less abled role, which is fantastic. Thank God that can happen in today's day and age. And with very little to say or do, the magic of her performance is in the not acting.
Yes, and it was perfectly balanced. Did exactly what it needed to be.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's a massive skill. Jo, overall general direction, I don't think that Simon Evans could have strained any more out of this in terms of production.
No, he worked with what he had. I think the set was interesting in terms of you got to see the back of it, which I guess is an interesting reflection on the piece, seeing what's behind the scenes, and this thing, the set that then revolved and moved around. Interesting ideas, moving back and then them stepping out of the set, constantly talking to us that suited that. There wasn't much you could do in terms of lighting, I don't think.
No.
So, an interesting set concept.
Yeah, but set by Peter McIntosh was really convincing. Of its time, the piece is set in the sort of late 60s, early 70s, it felt like, for me.
Yep.
And I just felt very much bought into that period and that era.
Yes.
Fab. Let's wrap it up then.
So, how many stars, I guess you were saying, for a day in the death of Joe Egg?
Well done.
I need to try and get it. That's not as easy to say as you think. But before we do, make sure you hit the subscribe, like or dislike, be something, don't be nothing. How many stars are we going to give this piece?
Well, this piece we're going to give 3. Middle
stars.
of the road. I mean, lots to love. Patricia Hodge's performance, I would say, absolutely. Toby Stephens in the role of Bri. But it just doesn't feel very relevant anymore in a weird way. It feels sort of old ground now, and I'm sure at the time it didn't. I'm just asking, is 2019 the best time for a revival for this? It's struggling to find an audience, guys, and I think this might be why, because the piece, there's something not quite right about it.
No, it does cover interesting questions, and come the end, I think there's more of a discussion to be had. But actually going through the piece, for me, I was disengaged at certain points. I admired the effort and the attention put into what was being done, but it was okay.
Yeah, and
it was all right.
But people either stayed and stood, or left, and they're sort of, I feel somewhere in the middle.
And there was a lot of people who were in the middle, and the middle fit for us. Oh, we've lost
our
light.
light, so we better wrap it up.
We're gonna
go. We were the Breaker Leggers.
And we'll catch you again soon.
Bye.